This panel is a little bit more honed in on royal and imperial courts, that the court system is kind of a small way that power systems exist in medieval worlds. Key to any medievalist setting, whether it's Western based, right, for Western empires, or Eastern or African or other environments, that they exist everywhere, that there are these kind of conglomerates of court systems. And how each of these could function in their material complexity and social complexity in games, specifically with the idea, keeping game mechanics in mind. How do you develop courts and things like that? I'm going to introduce each of the speakers, and then I think we can decide which order we'll go in. I'll let the brave ones go first, whoever that wants to be. And then we're going to have the rest of the time dedicated to Q&A. So I think that means everybody gets about 15 minutes. I'm going to have a timer going, and if I go over, I'll nudge you and let you know. 15 minutes is good for each person. So alphabetically, I think I've got, well, randomly here, I've got Hirohito Tsuji, who is a specialist on the imperial family of Japan, currently working at the University of East Anglia. His work covers genealogical aspects of branches of the family, but also the history, historiography, and public reception of imperial Japanese history more widely. His diverse interests have also included citizen science projects on art history and analyzing game representations of late medieval Japan. And he is a licensed Shinto priest and an amateur Enka singer. Amazing resume. And we also have Blair Apgar, who is an art historian focusing on high medieval Italy, and especially the courts of Matilda, of Canossa. Their work looks at how Matilda's material patronage intersected with issues of authority, agency, and gender, and how it intersects with the wider development of the investiture controversy. They currently teach at Elon University, North Carolina, and have worked extensively on ludic receptions of the Middle Ages, including as one of the conveners of the Middle Ages in Modern Games conference series. I think we have that in common. We've overlapped there a little bit, yes. And then we have Andreas Kjeldsen, who is an indie game developer currently developing the game titled The Knight and the Maiden, a modern medieval folktale, which mixes visual novel and adventure game mechanics in a story based around the court of the fictional Principality of Castamont. In A Fairy Tale Beginning, our protagonist dresses as a knight to enter a tourney and save her father from an unjust imprisonment, but romance, court politics, and intrigue make things a little more complicated after that, to be continued, not to be spoiled. And then we have François Alliot, who is a game developer and the design director at Nerial. He is best known for his game Reigns, which focuses on simple swipe decision mechanics to take the player through a variety of medieval courtly decisions and strategically balance different priorities. The Reigns system has also been applied to a range of different courtly settings, including Reigns Air Majesty, Reigns Game of Thrones, and Reigns Three Kingdoms. So I think that covers everybody. Thank you all. You can, I would say raise your hands, but that's okay. So who wants to go first? Now you may have to raise your hand physically in your camera or otherwise. Should I nominate?
I can go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will mute myself and you can take it away.
Sure. I've just kind of loosely organized some thoughts that I thought might be kind of a useful place to start. So this is a wonderful introduction, Madeline. Thank you so much. So my research, at least one strand of it anyway, really digs into Matilda of Canossa and looking at how she established herself. As an art historian, a lot of that kind of revolves around her patronage and kind of the objects within her domain. But when kind of preparing for this roundtable, I was thinking a lot about her biography. And I'm just gonna, since I have a copy in front of me, I'm just gonna hold it up because this is the kind of most common kind of published version, and it's fantastic. It's in Italian, but if you read Latin, you'd be able to access it. But I was thinking about descriptions of her court at Canossa really specifically, because Canossa is kind of famously the location where she hosts both the king and the emperor in the vesture controversy, and kind of resolves this conflict. And depending on what contemporaneous source you're looking at, has very different views of how this goes down. And unsurprisingly, Matilda's biography really positions herself very importantly. But we hear very little about the kind of social fabric of her court. A lot of this is kind of reading between the lines. But I'm really interested in a kind of description of the actual location itself that comes in book one. So book one kind of deals with her family and kind of the longer legacy of the Kjeldsen line, and book two is mostly her own achievements. And so I'm thinking specifically, this is a chapter of book one, wherein we have the city of Canossa, or the castle of Canossa, I guess is a better characterization, and the city of Mantua, and they've been personified, and they are essentially trading jabs with each other. And there's something really interesting about this. Essentially, the kind of context is Matilda's father, Boniface, he dies, and there must have been some dispute about where he would have been buried. This is kind of a through line that goes throughout the text, but the writer of the text, Donazzone, is thinking Canossa is the most proper place for these Canossan burials, right? Matilda ought to be buried there. Her mother ought to be buried there. Boniface ought to be buried there. And Canossa, as this kind of personified thing, really makes the case about the superiority of this kind of reinforced kind of mountaintop kind of stronghold over the city of Mantua. And it got me thinking about the ways in which developers and games generally might be thinking about the court as a character. And this kind of gets me, I have some way long ago, but background in kind of creative writing and thinking about the ways that we set scenes. And part of that, right, the idea that the setting itself can act as a character. And I think kind of where I want to take part of the discussion today is thinking about how we can make courts more specific to the kind of contemporaneous conditions, and rather have them be unique in some facets, and have them have a role in the way that they shape the characters and the responses of characters, not just to the landscape, not just the setting, but to each other. And I think that this could get at something really interesting, not the least of which, thinking about maybe potentially medieval conventions of cities and strongholds and courts kind of making their case for being the most superior location. They clearly had these thoughts wrapped up in it, or at the very least, the author, Donazzone, did. And I think that there's some of that energy that we might be taking into the development of kind of medievalist or medieval adjacent games that could potentially, I don't want to use the word authentic, so I won't, but we'll say getting closer to something that has real ties, right, to medieval inspiration. Even if it kind of maybe looks and acts differently, it might kind of be an interesting touchstone. So that's kind of where I wanted to start today, is just kind of thinking about that anecdote from the 11th century, early 12th century. I think that's all I have to say about that.
Excellent. So we won't save your thoughts if you have specific questions for Blair. We will go ahead and let all the panelists speak and then go from there. Who's next? Okay, François, you can have it.
Thank you. And thank you for the introduction. So yes, I'm going to talk about a bit about rings then. So we made this game 8 years ago called Rings, which we pitched to our publisher developer as a mix of Tinder and Game of Thrones. So the principle of this game is that you are a king, and you have court members. So you have various really stereotypical members of the court, like the priest, the noble, the jester, come and talk to you and ask questions to you, the king, and you answer by swiping left or right, okay, yes or no. And you have at the top of the screen, you have 4 values. which represents the state of your kingdom, if you want. You have the army, you have the people, or the demography, if you want. You have the money, and which is associated to the merchants and generally speaking, the nobility, and you have the church and religion, and so we started this game as a management simulation, if you want. So you were trying to bring the numbers up, if you want, but we quickly discovered that by putting together the sort of very strong power of the king making decisions in sort of medieval court, and the silliness of answering to this mighty request by swiping left and right was actually in itself very funny. And so we played with we always try to play with that sort of dynamic between that sort of gap between the importance of the decisions you are taking and the actual way you were taking them by swiping. And then we also use that. We discovered that also that was putting the king in a very interesting position, because the king is never is supposed to be the head of state, and so is supposed to have all the power of the state, but actually because you're always answering by swiping, so you don't have all information, you don't really know what each of these court members actually want, so it becomes very difficult to keep the balance of your kingdom. And in our game, if you want, the power of the king is always balanced by the fact that it is infinitely very, very powerless, because every time the values go up or down, and you have a risk of dying, because when for example, religion goes to the bottom, it's anarchy, and the kingdom goes awry, and so you die. But also, if religion takes if you maximize religion, you will also die, because you are introducing a theocracy, if you want, and the priests are overpowerful and they take over the kingdom. So you have to keep the sort of balance between the four values, and this becomes the game. We try to keep the sort of balance, and this in itself was meant as a commentary on the notion of power in general, and particularly modern power. And so that was it. I think regarding to the theme of this table, I think what is interesting with ranks is that we tried. We didn't try to represent a real court. Of course, it's not about. We sprinkle history. We use the stereotypes of history to be shortcuts for people to play with the notions we want them to play with, if you want. And so, for example, the members of the court were always representing something. So the priest, for example, when the priest comes and talks to you, there's generally a good assumption that if you answer yes to the priest, the religion will go up, and if you answer no, it will go down. But sometimes it may not, and sometimes you have characters which are like the doctor, like the noble, which are playing on multiple values. Okay, like the noble will probably have a consequence on the army, but also on the money, and potentially on the religion too. So we used these stereotypes of, if you want, and the court as conduits to bring this sort of management simulation that is ranked. And we used that to bring the humor also in the game, because each of these court member is a bit crazy, to be honest. And so yeah, so that's it. I'm happy to answer any question you might have on the game and what it meant. I think I will stop here because it's been maybe too long. But if I can happily go deeper on different subjects.
You do have, I mean, plenty of time if you'd like to, or if you want conversation to develop with group.
Yeah. Let's conversation develop with questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And that leaves Andreas or Hirohito for next in line. It's always going to be best for last, no matter who it is. Okay, excellent. Oh, now I've said best is last and no one wants to go next. I'm sorry. If either of you are speaking, I can't hear you for some reason. Make sure you are unmuted.
Hello?
On your own screen. Andreas, it looks like you're not muted now. Do you want to try?
Hello?
Yeah, good, great.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to try to do a screen share here because that'll make it a whole lot easier to figure out what I'm talking about. And I hope this works. Does that work? Perfect. So yeah, I'm just going to...
Sorry, so it looks like I'm still just seeing your camera, not your screen. Oh wait, it's a separate window.
Yeah, I think you need to go
if we tap on, if you...
I think you need to go into speaker view maybe, or grid view.
Perhaps I'm a bad example being on an iPad currently. Can everyone else, or Japheth, does it looks good on your end? I can see it now. I just had to tap on something. So.
Okay, so we're good?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Unless we hear otherwise. Okay, great.
So I'm just going to give a very brief presentation of the game, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of detail of of how the court operates in this game setting. So the game I'm working on is called The Knight and the Maiden, a modern medieval folktale, which admittedly is a slightly unwieldy name and probably not great for marketing. But it is kind of a statement of intent for the whole project, which is to make a game that is inspired by the late medieval period, roughly the late 15th century, kind of branching into the early, or diverging into the early 16th century. So just at the tail end of the Middle Ages. And the themes and events that characterize that period. But it's also with a very modern sensibility. Like Blair said, this is very much a medieval adjacent game, not a historical game as such. And we touch on some issues of gender, class differences, queer identities, justice inequality, all that sort of thing. Which is not to say that medieval people didn't think about things like that, but yeah, it is very consciously a modern story. There we go. And just to briefly touch on a few of the inspirations, like I said, 15th century history, a bit of early 16th century. We have a lot of inspiration from the Ace Attorney series and other various visual novels, more generally. Much of the story is told through dialogue and illustrations. We're also drawing a lot on classic adventure games, 2D point-and-click games, especially in the sense that we're not really trying to model anything here. There are no branching storylines or anything of the sort. It's a very specific story that we're telling here. And finally, I'm drawing a lot of inspirations from tabletop role-playing games, much like Disco Elysium, like we mentioned earlier. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for about 30 years, and I'm what we call in the hobby a forever GM, in the sense that I usually run as a game master, not as a player. So I've got a lot of experience from building various adventures, campaigns, running games, and all that is very much going into this game. Kind of like making a game that feels a little bit like playing in a tabletop role-playing campaign. So the game is a narrative-driven adventure game with some light puzzle solving. There's a lot of dialogue, a lot of character interaction. You can switch between these two characters, which are actually the same character, Charlotte and the Mystery Knight. Because Charlotte Montfort, our main character, is disguising herself by putting on a plate mail armor and becoming the Mystery Knight. Which she does because the whole point of the story is that her father, Sir Gilbert, has been unjustly imprisoned for reasons that are not quite clear at the beginning of the story. But she's developed a plan that if she participates in this tournament that happens every year in the city of Castamont, where he's been imprisoned, if she wins that tourney, then she can request a boon from the local prince, and she can use that boon to hopefully win her father's freedom. Unfortunately, it won't be quite that easy, but at least that's the plan. So the game takes place in the city of Castamont, which is kind of inspired by it's an independent city-state, much like you would find in northern Italy in the late 15th century, a flourishing center of commerce and learning, which is threatened by the neighboring kingdom of Lyonesse, which is attempting to annex the city. Has attempted that several times. There was a big war about 15 years ago, which Castamont, or rather a whole coalition of nations, narrowly won. And this time Lyonesse is trying again, but this time in attempting a more of an intrigue approach, which Sir Gilbert, Charlotte's father, has been mixed up in, and which Charlotte now will have to navigate and figure out what is going on. So moving on to the court itself. So Castamont is governed by the Prince Vincenzo, Prince Vincenzo of Castamont. But of course, there is a whole court that centers around this prince, with different power centers, different officials. There's a crown princess with her servants, her lady-in-waiting. There's a guard captain, there's a chamberlain, there's a spy master, and so forth. Actually, the prince himself is kind of a remote character for much of the game. You do need to get an audience with him at first to gain his permission to joust in the tournament, but otherwise he kind of disappears into the background. And instead you have to communicate, you have to interact with these different characters, these different officials, and try to navigate the politics of the court. And of course, again, this is all happening within the framework of a narrative. There's no real modeling going on here or anything of the sort. But looking at some of the different examples of how this court operates. I mentioned the audience that you have to get with the prince. Obviously, you can't just walk into the court and ask to talk to the prince. You have to talk to the chamberlain first, and then he'll look at you and say, "Okay, yeah, you're dressed as a knight. You're probably reliable person, you can go in and talk to the prince. And then you can go in there and meet some of the different power players in this court, meet the prince, again, captain, spy master, and some of the other nobles. And then petition to join the tournament as an unnamed knight, as an anonymous knight, because that sort of thing is usually frowned upon. The tournament itself is, of course, also held by the prince. The annual Castamontes tournament is a matter of great prestige to the prince. And here you're going to meet 7 different knights, which kind of forms a framework for the whole story, because each of the knights have a chapter of their own. And Charlotte's problem here is that she's talented, she's brave and smart, but she's not very good at jousting. She has some talent at it, but she's not a match for any of these 7 knights who have done jousting for almost their entire lives. So she'll have to find some kind of weakness for each of them that she can use to kind of get into their minds a little bit and put herself in a position where she can win. And assuming she does win, then of course we get into a little bit of the subverting the system part, where this definitely subaltern person has suddenly won the big prestigious tournament of the city, and then the whole system kind of gets thrown into turmoil. So of course, one of the most important functions of the court is to act as a court of law. Here we're again drawing on the Ace Attorney inspirations. There are going to be several court cases throughout the game, some of them happening in an actual court of law, some of them happening more in a public court of public opinion. But here you will have to find evidence to figure out a mystery, what's going on with the mystery, what is really the truth behind all of these intrigues, and perhaps even a murder mystery along the way, you never know. And then in a typical Ace Attorney mechanic, pick the right piece of evidence at the right time, and pick the right witnesses when you have those, and then kind of navigate your way through all of these mysteries and arrive at the truth. Of course, at some point you'll have to defend your father, Sir Gilbert. And here we have this lovely story illustration, which actually kind of shows some of the different power players in the court. The prince sitting in judgment, Chamberlain kind of whispering in his ear there. We have the Lyric, the spy master, who's definitely not having a good day there in the middle. And we have the whole court kind of rearranging itself and adjusting to this new unexpected character that has appeared here, and thrown all of their previous arrangements into disarray. Obviously, a court doesn't consist only of nobles and aristocrats. Caesar did, in fact, have a cook with him. And in Castamont, for example, we have these different people behind the scenes. We have the cook, we have the jailer, we have different people. For example, the cook has the kitchens as her undisputed domain, and if you do try to enter the kitchens as the mystery knight, then the chef will yell at you, because they're doing actual work down there, and they don't want any fancy folks getting in and getting in the way. So that's one situation where Charlotte can do some things that the mystery knight can't do. And finally, just to talk a little bit about the overall philosophy of this game, this development process. Like I said, this isn't a historical game as such. I don't attempt any kind of historical accuracy, and I mean, you could have a whole conference only about what that phrase even means. But what we do try is to, rather, we don't try to recreate any historical milieu either. Like, this is not like Milano in the year 1490 or anything of the sort. Rather, what I do is to use history more as a resource to inform and drive the world building, inspire the narrative and characters. Lots of the characters and lots of the events are based on real history. We add details that contribute to the settings. Authenticity, again, perhaps a problematic term. Verisimilitude, whatever you want to call it. Basically making a world that feels alive to the player, and also hint at a context outside the player's immediate experience. Trying to create a feeling for the player that this world doesn't exist just for you. It's a court that has people that existed before you came here. They have a history together, and they will maybe continue to exist after you leave. So that is the game. Thank you for your attention, and please subscribe to my newsletter. That would make me very happy.
Thank you. I think you're still sharing your screen, or at least for me, it's still there. Let me see if I can go back. I'm stuck. Viewing. There we go. Okay, fabulous. Yes, thank you so much, Andreas. I definitely have questions and a keen interest in this game, so I might have to invoke, I don't know, chair privileges of asking questions. But last but not least, please, Hirohito, if you could give us your talk. Can't hear you. Hirohito, I cannot hear you. Can anybody else hear? No. Okay. You are unmuted on our end. Try that. M, did you have a suggestion, or?
Often when I connect, it's the microphone input, as Maria Vai has also said in chat. If you just click the arrow next to the microphone button at the lower left of the screen, just make sure the correct microphone input is selected.
I still got nothing.
Can you hear me?
Yes. No. Now we do. Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hello everyone. こんにちは。I am Hirohito Tsuji, PhD candidate at the University of East Anglia in the UK. Today I'll talk about the imperial court and power in video games about medieval Japan. Samurai are the main characters featured in medieval Japanese video games, within the princes or nobles rarely playing a letting role. I believe this is due to Japan's pre-modern status system and national identity, as the term Christenchemium term suggests. There is a tendency in Japan to be afraid to show disrespect to the emperors and the imperial family, and in fact, it is mainly a small number of extremists such as anti-monarchist and far-left terrorist groups who voice such criticism. As a historical fact, during the early to middle medieval period, the imperial court sometimes went to war with the shogunate in attempt to regain political power from the samurai society, but few games are based on these themes. These trends are not limited to the modern era. In Japanese history, the period of emperor parent rule was extremely short-lived, with most of the political and military actions being conducted by the authorities of the time in the name of the emperor. Very few historical figures had attempted to kill the emperor or destroy the imperial court to deprive their authority. In other words, it was extremely important for many powerful people to have the emperors and their court on their side. Therefore, especially in simulation games on medieval Japan, the games are designed in such a way that sending tribute to the emperors or gaining court rank is an advantage, while being treated as an enemy by the imperial court is a disadvantage. We should also be noted that definition of samurai was not actually finalized until the early modern period, and the concept of samurai in the Middle Ages was very complex. In late ancient times, many low-rank nobles who had no prospects of obtaining an official position in court society went down to the countryside in search of a place to play an active role. They became self-sufficient by farming in the countryside, but there were many incidents of someone plundering the crops in the field without permission. Unlike in modern times, while police forces functioned in the medieval era, when self-defense was rule, people had no choice but to protect their own lives and properties. They armed themselves for such reasons, and this was the beginning of the samurai. This means that the roots of the samurai lie in the court nobility. In the late medieval period, on the other hand, some people from lowly backgrounds were selected as samurai because their abilities were recognized by their lord, while others used their ability to defect the traditional samurai and accentuate the status of samurai themselves. Most of the samurai active in the Sengoku period were clearly the latter. The former had a clear genealogical background and a kind of nobility, but only a limited number of families combined military prowess and survives into modern times. In fact, it is overwhelmingly the latter who are popular with many users and history fans. In many games, popular samurai have a brave and handsome face, while lesser-known samurai from court nobles have a eerie indices whitewashed makeup. This may be an expression of the stereotype the samurai are robust, very brave, while Aristoteles are decadent. These stereotypes are probably due to the widespread prejudice in the early modern period against the court nobles as weak and lazy, and in the modern period for the samurai and military officials, namely as hardworking and skilled in behavior. Also, it is common that in many games, court nobles also wears white makeup and speak in the very funny, unique tone. These trends are also true of manga, anime, films, and television dramas, and particularly true of video games. I suspect that one of the many reasons for this is that sometimes game players are not necessarily Japanese history fans or familiar with medieval Japan, and therefore the characteristics of each character are presented extremely in a more accessible way. While these are a true representation of the reality that the imperial family and the imperial court in the Middle Ages as authority but not power, they do not necessarily reflect historical facts. I think it is very interesting to analyze medieval games set in Japan from this perspective in order to situate popular images and stereotypes of the imperial family, imperial court, and samurai in contemporary Japanese and global society. I am also interested in whatever there are similar trends in the treatment of the royal family and court in games set in other regions, such as Europe, and would like to ask the other panelists about this later. Thank you very much for your attention. ありがとうございました。
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I think that we have more than enough to generate some really good discussions with the rest of our time here before we have a close for the day.